Welcome, everybody, to episode 15. It is 15, right? Yes, 15 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast with your host, Dan, and my fabulous co-host, Rob.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Thought I'd do another one.
Let's squeeze in as many Obi-Wan Kenobi hello there's as possible.
Someone did one last night in Strad, so it's been on my mind.
Okay, fair enough. So yes, we are on episode 15 of our D&D podcast where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and all things TTRPG. I nearly got it wrong again, like last episode.
It's a tongue twister.
TTRPG. Getting all the letters in there. Tabletop role-playing games. We are going to do our usual spell of the week, monster of the week. I have brought a spell this week. Rob has brought a monster, hopefully. No, I know he has.
Certainly have.
We are prepared, so I know he has. We are going to talk about those, and then we're going to move on to our general topic. Our general topic this week is kind of another one of our improv games. We might also discuss a little about improv or improvisation in the D&D space. But that will come later on in our podcast. As usual, as is now tradition, I ask you all to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to our Instagram and our formerly Twitter, now called X. Follow on there. Please like and comment on our posts that go up there. We do have a Twitch channel. If you want to go check that out, you can go check out our Twitch. Though we don't currently stream on there, maybe in the future, though we may also just choose to stream on YouTube if we do choose to stream. But right now we don't, but you can follow us on there if that is something you wish to do. But we will dive into our podcast. There isn't really any news to talk about. There's always little things going on in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. It's usually just like, someone's releasing a new book or a new content, or there's a playtest updates. I don't really read the playtest because I was reading it quite frequently, but I'll be honest, I got kind of, I don't know, bored of reading the same shit every single time. Do you
Yeah,
get?
when one D&D came out, it came out with quite a lot of stuff at first, and it was like we're going to test this for 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to test something else for 2 or 3, and it was quite engaging at first to get on with it. But then it was just like because they changed some big things, like a couple of like classes and stuff like that. It's like, all right, well, I don't feel like I want to test that now because we're running a full campaign. So I think it kind of dripped off a little bit, but
Yeah, I think for me as well is that a lot of what they were releasing was the same thing as their last update. They were just
yeah,
tweaking things, and they were including whatever they'd settled on as well in the next update, so that everyone has it. I can understand from their perspective, but when you start reading it all, you're just it's boring, and it's D&D are not the only one. Being that I've been recently been making my way through the Cyberpunk Red book, it's just as bad for like
oh yeah,
minutia of these little things that they talk about that sometimes I get it's kind of maybe it's just trying to set tone, but it makes it a little bit of a boring read. I will credit I guess it's Mike Pondsmith or his publisher or his editor where there are points where they've in a clear box in bold and everything they will put in like a rule so you can just quickly refer to it and see what it is. That is a really smart move. Um,
yeah,
Dungeons Dragons sometimes highlights, but emboldens, or how you want to put it, puts it in bold, certain things, or italicizes things, but they could definitely do with a bit more of a jump
yeah,
out um, ruling, or like some of the basic rulings, if it's just like armor class, or how to work out initiative, or I mean, it may be, and I'm talking out my ass now. I haven't looked at the player's handbook part of that for a long time. Even if my player's handbook is looking a little dog-eared these days.
oh yeah, mine too. To be fair,
That is a
that's
sign of a dedicated Dungeons and Dragons player.
Much loved documents and books.
Yeah. But that will do for an opening because no news, but we talked about our opinions on
Yeah,
books, I guess. On from an editorial standpoint, we're criticizing the way things are done, but there is probably not a better way, to be honest. There isn't a better way.
nah, I can't really think of one. I mean, in terms of the news as well, I think we're in a little bit of a lull at the minute anyway because we're approaching 2024. I think it's going to be there might be some releases early on, but if there isn't, then it's going to just be kind of rolling into
Yeah,
maybe finally approaching that one D&D release or something along those lines.
I was expecting. Well, I suppose to say expecting, we've had them new books.
Yeah.
We have had Planescape, and the Book of Many Things has just come out. So yes, I was expecting books in the lead up to Christmas. They've not.
Mm.
For some reason, I was thinking, up to Christmas, that means like December, right? No. Usually it's before, give people enough time to order them and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
So there have been
mid-November.
books and things to talk about. Um, I guess that's probably a little bit the only. There's a kind of bit of news with regards to that, in that there is now some Grim Hollow is available on D&D Beyond. If people are
Oh,
users
was
of
it?
D&D Beyond, some Grim Hollow is on there. For people who are
Well,
interested.
fine. I know people that will be interested.
Grim Hollow is probably one of the main ones I've always wanted to get into,
Yeah,
or give them my money. But I don't have a lot of it to give, so I haven't ever received it.
that's understandable. Anyway, should we do
Yes,
the dreaded dice roll?
let's do the dreaded dice roll. I'm gonna go on to purples this week. I think purple dice is
Hmm,
actually
interesting.
it's not really looking very purple on the screen, but it is purple.
Yeah, I can see it. It's quite a dark purple. I've
It's
got more of a lighter purple this
yeah, like
week,
a
oddly.
lilac.
Yeah,
Yeah, this one has got
slightly
like
clear.
glitter on it or in it. I think
Yeah,
technically it's in the actual resin itself.
do
But
love a good dice.
let us roll. Oh, for fuck's sake! I do not roll well on these
I don't
things.
think it matters this week. Yeah, I got a 91.
Oh, I got a two.
Yeah, okay. It's good to be beaten by only 1 point.
It's just not it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign.
Uh,
If you believe in such things. I guess I'm going first.
Joe, what have you done to his dice?
I know he's cursed the entire. It's because they were in his proximity. This must be what it is. We played in person. He was there, and now he's trans.
Maybe my dice are cursing me because I gave him some of my old sets.
Oh, you took you took away people's families members, and
Hey, I was thinking I haven't touched you in a long time. You could go to a new home and you can be played with by.
I thought it was very generous. I'm guessing dice aren't that way inclined. Who knew? Nah, I'm sure it's just luck. But I guess I'm deciding, and I decide I'm gonna go first with spell. I usually choose you see, so I thought I'd be different and mix it up and choose myself. So there, yeah, this week, spell of the week, brought to you by Dan. Keep it simple. I went with a cantrip, favored cantrip for our clerics and our druids and artificers as well, and that is guidance. Whoop whoop for guidance.
We love it.
I think, arguably, probably one of the most loved cantrips in Dungeons and Dragons.
It's up there. It's uh, it's definitely got a lot of love. Um, Maybe even more so in Baldur's Gate.
Oh, without dice, because they made it a reaction, basically. It is one of those cantrips that where if I hear of a cleric or a druid, I forgot artificers could take it, so but if I hear of a cleric or a druid that hasn't taken guidance, I make fun of them because that is completely stupid. Which makes me just make me think to check Luke's character sheet and see if his druid has got it. Because if it hasn't, he hasn't used it as far as I'm aware, and if he hasn't got it,
I give a druid a little bit more um, credit because they also have druidcraft, and if you've not taken druidcraft, I think it should also be made fun of slightly.
Yeah,
I also think they should just get druidcraft without it taking up one of their cantrip slots, but that
mm,
is a different discussion
as
that
a,
we don't need to
as,
have.
I think
That's a rant.
yeah, yeah. With Druid, you should choose. I think it's. I don't know. I feel like it's almost worse for Druid. How many Druid cantrips are there that are offensive? Because that's always the big thing. People want to make sure they get at least an offense. And I can off the top of my head think of Thorn Whip.
The Storm Whip is the is it just called Infestation?
There is
Um,
infestation. Yeah.
This Produce Flame, because they get that instead of Fireball, although I have a very nice DM with Stone King's
Mm.
Thunder that has let me, on my Wildfire Druid, take Firebolt.
It is just Firebolt, but you can hold it as a light for a while.
But it's less damage as well.
Yeah, I suppose.
Importantly, it's, it's less damage. I like D10s. Who doesn't like D10s?
Yeah, so I suppose my argument is null. 'Cause my other thing was clerics get quite a few to choose from, but then maybe I'm just seeing it from the perspective of someone who has played a cleric and not a druid.
Maybe.
But either way, I would still go right. I'm gonna choose my offensive spell, get that done. Probably Thorn Whip, if I'm honest. And then I would then go get Druidcraft if I'm a druid, and then Guidance. But if I'm a cleric, it's gonna be probably Sacred Flame, and then
Or Toll the Dead.
Toll the Dead. Toll the Dead is good. I don't know why I like Sacred Flame. I think Sacred Flame just thematically works if you're a druid. It's probably why I choose it over Toll the Dead.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it depends
I
what
think it
domain you are.
might also be that Toll the Dead is not a basic rules one. It's a player's handbook one, or is it? Or is it not even a player's handbook? Toll the Dead.
Maybe.
We're talking about cantrips in a very general way. Let's go back to guidance. Guidance,
Love a tangent.
guidance is nearly always at least the second spell I choose would choose with a cleric or a druid. That is simply because for a minute you have the ability to roll once or one off d4 to add to any ability check of your choice, which I mean is also great. It's not also good. It is great, but what is also really great is that you can make it before or after rolling the die,
Yes.
which is the thing that I find comes up a lot in my as a DM, the much more than I ever thought about as a player, which is really weird. I think about it a lot as a DM with regards to like making sure that players are doing it the right way, but also that I'm doing it the right way with any monsters.
Oh yeah.
But it is a thing, something that people, when they're reading their spells or their ability, should check to whether you get to do it before or you can do it after.
It's interesting because a lot of spells that allow you to roll, or not even sometimes not even spells. Sometimes it might be like abilities that let you do this, like bardic inspiration and like memories of a past life if you're a reborn race, where you can do something similar. A lot of them state you can do it after the roll, but before the DM states whether it's a pass or a fail. But actually, if you read the simple text on D&D Beyond, it just says it can roll the die before or after making the ability check. The spell then ends.
Yeah,
So nothing's actually saying you can't say that's a fail. You rolled an 18 on an investigate and you say, "Well, you didn't find much. I don't know why the DC is so high." And then go, okay, I'll roll a d4 and see if I can find anything else. It's weird.
yeah.
I'm not used to playing it that way.
No, I don't typically play it that way. I don't think I don't think players do. I don't think any player would normally think that. There's obviously I would argue there is a couple of downsides to guidance, which just by reading it often seems like a really cool thing. Firstly, it only applies to ability checks. So it's basically anything you would normally thumbs up, roll anything you would normally um roll with
Yeah, it's an out of combat one,
a
really,
skill
isn't it?
check. Yeah. So it's not an attack. It's not a saving throw because there is one specifically for saving throw, but we'll get on to that in a moment.
It
Um,
is.
so that is, I guess you could call it a downside, but it is a cantrip limited magic. I think it's perfectly
Uh-huh.
fine. It's concentration.
Yep.
most people will have used it and then will add it to themselves. They will give themselves guidance and then almost immediately use it. It's not something that people will wait a minute to
Yeah.
use, unless it's something
It's an
like rogue's going to go sneak into a building, tap them for guidance as they sneak in. Maybe they might do that.
it's an interesting one because the concentration is often missed. So like I can think obviously there are classes other than cleric, druid, and artificer that have got access to guidance because picking up a cantrip is quite easy with feats or with class features like the warlock's book of shadows.
Or
If you take
the bards thing that we talk about nearly every week. We bring it
yeah,
up.
yeah, or spellcaster initiate because it's just a cantrip. It's very easy to get guidance. Anyone can get it. I mean, as long as your DM isn't the fun police and stops you can taking feats. But as a we all know, I'm a lover of warlocks. Warlocks are quite often concentrating on the spell hex. It's a very common way for them to play. You tend to reach a point where you're concentrating on the spell hex for 8 or 24 hours because the spell casts automatically at level 3, 4, or 5, depending on what your level your spell slots are. And that's somewhere where I found myself forgetting that I was concentrating on that, and then I would do things like guidance, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's a concentration spell. Oh, I just lost concentration on hex. Whoops." And it
I
can be a bit of a gotcha moment.
Yeah, yeah. I have uh I have done that in Baldur's Gate.
Yep.
Number of times I'll have done something with Will as the warlock that's just suddenly gone, oh no, that was especially with Hex, it's always around Hex. Always
Yeah, of
Hex.
course it is.
It's like,
It's
oh,
hex.
I had Hex. Oh, damn it! I just put up um
Detect magic or
what's it called? Hunger for Dark?
friends. Hunger of Hadar, yeah.
Yeah.
Darkness.
Managing concentration is something that everybody will fail at least once. Usually,
Oh
when
yeah.
you do, you remember not to do it again. But it happens. We had it in our in-person session, like over a week ago now, where our druid Luke he was
Oh yeah.
concentrating on a spell that then he was concentrating on polymorph, I think, and then he
No, he was
casts
concentrating on summon woodland beings or what
someone.
summon
Yes, that's right. So suddenly
the one.
wouldn't yeah, that's right because they polymorphed, but yes,
Yeah.
concentrating on summoned woodland beings, but then he cast moonbeam, didn't he?
Yeah.
It wasn't until
Whoops.
after the fight really that we realised, and we're like, ah, it's fine. Everyone makes that mistake.
Yeah.
It
And look,
happens.
he just happened to roll atrociously with Moonbeam anyway and did
Yes.
about 5 damage with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not an impact that really mattered, but
No, I think, and he was a good sport about it. Like,
yeah.
and I didn't punish. There was no need to be done or punish it. Um, these mistakes happen. Um, takes an action to cast as well for guidance,
Yeah.
which means that it's not a reaction. It's quite commonly used as a reaction. I think this is even more evident in when you go and watch actual play shows, like Critical Role we talk about quite a bit, or Dimension 20 we also talk about a bit. There is quite a lot of like very quickly can I add guidance to that, which is
Yeah.
would be considered a reaction. Most DMs are you for the most part really lax about that and will just allow you to do it. I think if you were taking advantage um, of it too much, I think a DM's like to go, well, really, you should be doing it before. Could you keep forgetting? You're not clearly learning. I have to now punish you.
I'm pretty lax with it with me because whenever I'm thinking about something like that, I personally is like I will say to myself internally, where's the peril?
Hmm,
And if there's currently not really any peril, then adding an extra 6 seconds to a task isn't going to change
it's
anyone's
true.
life in the negative way. So I think that's why I don't particularly care. Obviously, as a training point or a schooling point or a educational for players, if they keep forgetting it, it's probably a good tact to then say, right, well, maybe look at why you're forgetting it. Maybe you're not really considering it that much as a cantrip or a spell, and you just going, oh, guidance, and actually maybe start trying to include it in your role play and say,
Yes,
how do
yes,
you guide? Is it because I think there's a guidance is an interesting subject in terms of that, because some people will, and I used to do this as Narakis because he always liked to be a little bit of a teacher. He would actually try to educate and guide someone. However, that's just using your knowledge. That's not a spell, really. When I actually stop and think about it, how am I aiding that with magic? I'm not. I'm being like, well, have you thought about leverage
mm,
and angles? And like he was an artificer, obviously, he's going to talk about like mechanics.
yes,
But actually, when you think of it as a druid or a cleric, it's like, well, hand on heart, pray to Saloon, make this go a little better. And I touch my friend on the shoulder,
yeah.
and
I always did it with
um,
Tor as a prayer. I think with an artificer, you could view it as a transference of knowledge magically, like tapping
yes,
somebody and part of your knowledge goes to them. That would be probably your best way to do it. Which is actually bring up the point of it is also a touch spell, which means that if your friend is, if you've jumped over a crevasse and now your friend is going to, and they're across the, back across the crevasse, you're no good to them because you've got the crevasse between you and them. You have to be able to touch them.
that's where I'm more likely to be less lenient with the
100%.
reaction guidance to say like, well, how do you get to them to touch them?
Yes.
You should have done that a minute, well,
Yeah.
nearly a minute ago.
One of my actual really favorite, one of the ways I actually really learned the power of guidance, and ironically, I think a lot of other people did as well, was in a one shot that Critical Role did. It was a werewolf one. I think Liam O'Brien was the um DM for that one.
Is that when they were like a family?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I can't
I
remember
remember that.
who what the guy was called. There was a guy on the show who um who was playing a cleric, and he would just be constantly like, whatever his god was, guide me. And it became like, it was almost becomes a joke because everything he did, every single little thing, because it's a cantrip, it's unlimited use. So everything
Yeah,
he did would require a roll. He would just be like, I don't know. For me, it would be like, morning lord, guide me, and then do it.
yeah.
Um, and I
And just take
really,
us on to sorry, carry on.
yeah, I was saying, and what the consequences of that was, I thought, oh, that is a really cool cantrip. Never realized it could be that um, useful. And then I started to watch how in the actual main Critical Role campaign, all of a sudden, the next opportunity to get a new cantrip, both Taliesin and Laura take guidance, and it suddenly becomes a use thing.
Oh, that makes me laugh. That reminds me of when both Beauregard and Yasha both took Sentinel at the same time because they both said, um, "Teachers, or mighty barbarian, what country? Not sorry, what country? What feat should we take?" And I can't remember his name. Laura's husband,
Travis.
Travis. Travis was like, "I don't know, Sentinel." So we both took it. Yeah, it was.
It's a weird thing to
And
go
what?
to Travis, but yeah, he knows, he knows. At the time, he was definitely one of the experts on melee
Probably, yeah.
classes.
I think on the what we were just talking about, how like using it so much proved how powerful it was. I have seen players get a little bit weirdly guilty about overusing it,
Hmm.
and it's quite an interesting thing because I think people suddenly become conscious that they're using guidance for every ability check, and then they start using it a bit less and try to strive for a
Yeah,
weird balance.
I don't think you need to
It's
though.
no, you don't. You
Doesn't bother
literally
me.
don't.
I don't.
I'll
I
never
can
judge.
understand. I can understand it. I can understand
I think you just get a bit self-conscious of you going, I cast guidance. Oh, I cast guidance. Wait, I cast guidance.
I think people get guilty with it, and it's a weird thing because I think I probably would as well. Feel a little bit like I'm annoying the DM if I was doing it constantly on other players,
Yeah,
because I'm constantly just like having to interrupt between a conversation between two other people to add guidance, which is a bit like how some people butt in and go, "Oh, actually, that's not how that's done," which I'm also guilty
yeah.
of. But like it feels like there's a conversation that you're interrupting. Whereas when you're doing it on yourself, which I would say really should be like over 50% of your uses of guidance, up probably even over 75% of your uses of guidance are
Yeah,
should be on yourself because it's a touch spell and it's there to be used so easily. Um, but I feel, as I said before, one of the things about this is about guidance that is I think I don't know if people forget or people don't know because I definitely know that people have used it with saves before. Is that it cannot be used with saves because there is
yeah,
already this, as I mentioned, there is another spell that does it, and that's resistance. Resistance is never taken really. It's never used. It can be used by the same people, so clerics, druids, and artificers, but
yep,
they generally don't take it. Which you might think, well, okay, the difference is saves. Well, it's because that's the difference between a check and a save is completely different, and that's where that's the problem.
yep.
Saves are when you are made to do something outside of your control, which is usually um, something you were not aware of beforehand. Ergo, you didn't have the opportunity to give resistance to yourself, and when it's only a minute that it lasts for, it's not something you're really going to spend your time doing.
I think that's it. Like it feels a little bit more than than guidance does. It feels a little bit more like a combat spell because a lot of saves are linked to spells like fireball,
Right.
synaptic static, charm spells, whatever. Um, so you feel like, wow, I'm only going to use an action to cast resistance on just myself um, to gain a D4 towards a save, whereas Um, at least the cleric, I never remember who else can learn it, but at least cleric can say, well, in that case, I'll just use a level 1 spell slot and I'll cast Bless on 3 of us.
Yeah, cleric, druid, and
So,
artificers can do resistance.
oh,
Um.
I'm talking about Bless.
Oh, bless.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so that's like, feels like the argument for resistance is almost overridden by Bless because it hits 3 people and it stays
Yes.
after the use. I think a good use of resistance is a perfect example. If I had chosen to take it
Mm,
on my druid,
yes.
because he's a rotund little dwarf man, and guess what? That means he has negative dexterity. So if he was going to do something that might require some dexterity, like if the group were climbing up a rope or doing something similar, lots of various acrobatic related
Mm,
actions. And he was like, do you know what? If I get a really low roll on my ability check, my DM might ask me for a save, and I might need resistance. Um,
mm.
that's kind
Uh,
of the best use I can think of, but it's still a bit of a stretch.
my thought was if you're in a dungeon and there's a couple corridors ahead of you, there's a good chance there's going to be trapped.
Yeah,
You might cast it either on yourself or on your trap finder. You'll probably say you're probably a rogue. That might be a use of it, but that's so situational,
yeah.
and that's the idea of going and or sometimes a little bit of a metagamey way. There is going to be traps down there.
At the same time, a lot of people that are playing that way will probably be quite good at finding traps
Mm,
and then setting them off with things like Mage Hand.
yes, or a
So
rock.
it's
Just
Oh
chucking a
yeah,
rock.
or a rock, or just simply the fact that if you're using the example and giving it to your rogue,
Yeah.
unless it's something like poison mist, a lot of traps that you would trip are going to be dexterity saves, and a lot of a rogue at a certain level, depending on what level you are, um, gets half damage on a fail and no damage on a success if it's a dex save. That's I can never
Evasion.
remember. Evasion, yeah, I think it's evasion. They get a few different abilities that have got quite similar names at various levels, so
I
I
think it's
always forget
evasion
which is
because
which.
it's the thing that the monk gets as well, isn't it? It's
Yes, it is.
evasion.
It's the same thing that the monk gets. Not the one that's the reaction that lets them take half damage,
No,
which they could also do against a trap. So
that's called something else.
yeah, yeah,
But no, yeah, it's less useful. And it's one that if I was going to create this spell as a writer for Dungeons and Dragons, I probably would have made that a reaction spell, a reaction cantrip. Um,
I would have also made it at least a D6, just because it
I
feels
think if
way
you're
less
gonna make it,
impactful than
if
guidance.
I think if you're gonna make it a cantrip that's also a reaction, I would just keep it as a D4.
Maybe.
If it was a spell, that's when you start going D6s, I think,
Yeah, perhaps.
because you want it to increase your chance, but you don't want it to make it almost a certainty, which you're getting very close to with a D. I know it's only two more on, it's only one on average more, um, but it starts to obviously you're leaning that way. But yes, guidance, very good. Take it, clerics and druids. Please do. Your party will be most grateful.
They will. And DMs perhaps think of homebrewing resistance to be a reaction, and you might see it get played at your table.
Well, they did it in 1D&D. I don't know if it stayed, but they definitely did it in the 1D&D playtest stuff.
Makes sense to me to make it a reaction. Really does.
Works in the video game, and a lot of people basically use it that way anyway. So you could do. Um, but yes, clerics, druids, take it. Otherwise, just I don't know, leave. I think,
Listen to our guidance and take guidance.
yes, listen to the pun master.
Do it.
Do it. Well, let's move on then. Let us finish with spell of the week and move on to monster of the week with Rob.
So that means it's my turn. I was having a read of the Planescape um, books the other day, and I was reminded of a creature that I knew existed anyway because I had been looking at sessions and a campaign in Sigil for a long time, so I was obviously excited, as I've mentioned before, when this book came out. And there is a creature, a celestial creature, that inhabits the city of Sigil, the big donut city that floats atop of an endless mountain. And they are called, I'm going to say Dabus. Feels
Dabus.
that's how you say it, Dabus. Dabus. Perhaps you could say Debu or Dabus or
Dabus.
Dabus or
Dabus.
Dabus or Dabus. But you say it however you feel comfortable saying it, as long as you say sigil the correct way. I don't care not to.
I feel like
Um,
it could have like a French edge to it. I don't know why.
Dabu.
Dabu.
Anyway, they are, as I said, medium humanoid celestials, kind of brownish robes, grey skin, slightly maybe demonic horns or goatish horns.
You see the picture because it will be on screen.
Yeah, they're cool. And what they do is they float around the city, tidying up after people. They have an aura of um, kind of rebuilding. If you read the law as they float around, the cracked pavements reconnect themselves. Bricks float up and fill the hole from which they fell from. Um, Properties rebuild themselves. So they are the maintenance droids, basically, of Sigil, and that's kind of how I see them. Um,
Yes,
if you go further on and read the law, they are kind of they're an interesting thing because it's like everybody knows this unwritten rule in Sigil, and that is attack these things at your peril, because the Lady of Pain is rumored to show up and
yeah,
walk from her and you burst into flames.
they are an arm of the Lady of Pain, and the only thing is don't.
Yeah,
One thing you don't do in Sigil, don't fuck with the Lady of Pain, and by fucking with them, you're fucking with her, and you don't do
yeah,
that.
Yeah, don't worship her and do not mess with these guys. Do not mess with her. So there's a lot of interesting characteristics about these. It very specifically says it's called physical restraint. The Dabus does not make melee attacks or opportunity attacks. Even in self-defense, they will not get their hands dirty, and I love that about them because, in a similar way to mind flayers, they're very telekinetic,
Mm.
and it doesn't really call it that. It doesn't say anything about psionics in their rules. It's just I think they're so intrinsically connected to the city of Sigil that they will just use the way that they repair the city around them, also weaponized. So their attack, their multi-attack, because they make two of these attacks, is flying brick. I just love that catch. Just imagine a group. Imagine you guys starting on these, and they just start tearing the buildings apart around them, flinging brick after brick at you. Fantastic! I just love it. It's both really cool. I mean, I was watching Home Alone 2 the other day, and that scene where Macaulay Culkin flings bricks at the at those two. Well, mostly at Joe Pesci, but Joe Pesci always gets out of the way, and Marv gets slammed in the face by many bricks. I'm reminiscent of that, and I just love a bit of slapstick. Um, they do also effectively speak in emojis. They
Okay.
don't speak verbally. They don't sing. They don't speak. They understand all languages but cannot speak. They communicate via symbol speech, which kind of feels a little bit like the cantrip Minor Illusion. They summon um, a written language in front of them, which is made up of symbols, random letters, all sorts of effectively. What was that font called that was just all weird symbols?
Wingdings,
Windings.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I always imagined it. And I like it because anyone can understand it as long as they pass a DC 10 intelligence investigation check, which does not require an action either. So if you're
Yeah.
in combat and these things are trying to tell you something, you don't need to use your action to try and understand it. Everybody gets to just make that check, as long as they can see. Yeah, I suppose. Um, so yeah, lots of unique qualities to these creatures, and I think that's why I love them. They're steeped in flavour, and lore and superstition. You know, like we said, don't mess with them. Lady of Pain will show up. Could be a good way to summon the Lady of Pain if you were ballsy enough to do that. Don't do that. Really don't do that. And then they've got an ability, as we love them, the recharge ability is called Grasping Ground. And this really takes their almost psionic kind of gift with the City of Sigil to that next level. It's called Grasping Ground. The Dabus causes a 20-foot square area of ground it can see within 60 feet of itself to sprout clutching appendages made of stone. Each creature of the Dabus's choice in the area must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take some bludgeoning damage and will have been grappled. While grappled in this way, the creature also has the restrained condition. The appendages vanish after 1 minute, or if the Dabus's concentration ends, as though concentrating on a spell. So they basically get to cast an AoE
Grasping.
Maximilian's Earthen Grasp
Yeah,
or
that's the one I'm
Grasping
thinking of.
Vines. There's loads of spells that have a very similar effect. It's not
I
an original effect, but it's nice flavour. I really like it.
I was thinking about the grasping hand spell. And I was sitting there,
Yeah.
and you were explaining it, and I was going, "What is that spell that I'm thinking of?" There's something here that and then you said, "Oh, yes, that earthing
It
grasp.
also
That's the
like
one."
really reminds me of Full Metal Alchemist, the kind of way that Edward would kind of, clasp his hands, push them into the ground, and then like fists would come out and
Mm,
grab people, and
yeah.
it'd always have that kind of weird visual texture where you could tell that the Earth was repurposing itself.
Yes.
Um, yeah, really cool stuff. But not really like a baddie to use, so
No.
they're an interesting thing.
One of the things that I really like about them, and it's a I don't know if it's a weird thing to like about them, is that I really want to reflavor them and take them because
Yeah,
if you were doing a campaign set in the Hells, for example, and you just need
yeah,
some guys that worked for whichever Archduke's plane that you're in. So if you're in Nessus, for example, and Asmodeus needs or Asmodeus would have random civil servants basically and bureaucrats. These make like the perfect like they are almost perfect for it. You might want to change little things like the symbol speech might become something else. Um,
Yeah,
but they
complex legal speak,
maybe.
terms and conditions.
And it's like yeah, I would love to be able to use them in our current campaign, World of Stormia. If I had known about them beforehand, I probably would have found a way to incorporate them. I don't
I
want to
think
use them now,
these
but
no, I think these would have been perfect instead of mind flayers in the halls of endless bureaucracy.
I did look at them, and
Yeah,
there was some reasons why I didn't use them.
mind flayers always work. I mean, also work very well in that situation. I'm not saying they'd be better, but I think they would
No, yeah.
fit in really well.
When I
They
came
just look at
when I was looking at what monsters to use for that purpose, I did look at um Dabus, Dabus, Debu. I did look at them.
look at
Um,
that face. It's just got such like
yeah,
you know exactly the kind of condescending tone. If that could speak,
yeah,
that it would be like, no, I don't think so.
yeah,
Uh, Not in this fine print. The pact does not dictate that you can do this.
yeah.
And if we were working for Asmodeus, they would definitely be the keepers of pacts.
Yes. Yeah, it's just yeah, when I trust me, it was better that I used mind flayers. There was a reason, and the reason is more to do with telepathy than anything else.
Yeah, I thought
Um,
that would be it, but maybe these guys can be there too.
sure. I mean, there's probably other ways I could use them, other places to use them in the city. Um, I haven't determined whether or not Sigil exists in that universe or that multiverse, that binary verse. Um, I haven't decided. Uh, so there probably is somewhere, but I think I would have found a way to make them work in world if I had known about when I created Stormy, but I didn't, so I didn't.
Yeah. Well,
But
yeah. I mean, before this book, I didn't see any kind of creature stat blocks for them when I was researching Sigil. I just found out about them as like a bit of the lore more
yeah,
than anything. So I wasn't really going to think of them as having stat blocks
no,
or even
that's fair.
anything like that. Kind of don't almost need it because really they shouldn't be attacked. But that said, I really do like the stat block. I think it's got some interesting
You
qualities.
never know with some parties, do you? So it
True.
could happen. I also think um, sometimes if even if you're not going to attack them, it's good to have stat blocks for interact for role play interactions.
This is true. Yeah, this is very true. At least worth knowing the charisma, the wisdom, the intelligence, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I was also thinking about if these things were to. I feel like if one of these was to be killed, and they could very easily be killed, they don't have a lot of hit points.
Yeah, no, they don't.
That
Low AC,
if
no
one
hit
is
points.
yeah, low AC 12 and 44 on average hit points, very easy to kill realistically for at least second tier definitely, but
Yeah,
first could do it as well. Um, I think I would easily see that as soon as you kill one, it's just immediately replaced by another. Just you kill one and another one just comes around the corner. Because they're
just
very
steps out of
much
the maze.
yeah. Because in part as well, they remind me of, at least in the lore to some degree, of the purpose of. We'll talk about my favorite video game series now, Mass Effect, and they are
Yeah,
the keepers of the Citadel, and they're just the green alien kind of bug things
yeah.
that walk around just maintain it. That's what they remind me of in their lore.
Hugely, yeah. Like, I mean, before the book came out, as I said, I was reading about Sigil and on all the wikis and various websites and things. And as soon as I read about that's why I called them maintenance droids. Or well, no, they're not droids in Mass Effect either. They're little alien things, but they just really remind me of all that. And Mass Effect was up there for sure.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's plenty of things like it out there in other fantasy or science fiction art media
Yeah,
things worlds. Um, But yeah, I think it's a very interesting. We've done a few of them lately of monsters that aren't like really built for combat, or if they are, they're built just to kind of be difficult or awkward. And I think these are another
Yeah.
great version of them or of that. So yes, recommended to everyone out there as well that you give it a go. That especially if you're going to do sigil, use them. If not, maybe consider, as I suggested, reflavoring and fitting them in somewhere else. Because they're something a little. I think they've got their unique little spot
Yeah,
in
for
in
sure.
in the greater manual of monsters. But we will move on to our next topic with that. You don't have anything else to add to that
No,
discussion?
I mean it's a fairly quick segment, but I do love these guys. There's no what's the word? There's no drama with them. There's
No,
no argument really.
no,
They're
no.
just cool.
And they're cool, and they're I can't really see an issue with the way they've been designed or built either. They've covered all their points. I even, as you'd mentioned, the no action required thing. That's a great addition to throw in there to just make it very clear. There's no argument there. No one's going to go, "Oh, we're supposed to do this from the middle of combat. It's trying to tell me something." No action required.
Do you know what? Actually, it just reminds me of. I don't know if this is actually a thing or if this is just something I've seen online, where a lot of radioactive material is dumped. Instead of writing signs in whatever the native language of the area is, or in English or whatever, they try to use symbols to make it obvious for people that might dig there in hundreds of years, that
Yes.
it is not to be dug. Um, their speech reminds me of that. I've seen like some quite interesting signs, and I can't remember if they were a joke or if that was an actual thing. But hey, makes me
Yeah.
think of it.
Yeah.
Like it's like a language that it should be understandable by anyone.
Yes. I think that's probably what the intention is. I would think with their wingdings. But yes, we'll move on to the next topic. We're going to do, well, I'll explain it. I think it was around about episode 10-ish, somewhere around that mark. Might have been just before. We did a bit of a improvisation sort of game task thing, where I came up with a world or I built a sort of campaign idea that I threw at Rob, and his job was to come up with a character that he would play in that world. Obviously, we don't roll for stats and that sort of thing, but we can come up with the sort of thing that he would generally want to play, what would interest him, character class, race, that sort of thing. The last one we did was the pizza thing, the pizza world. You can go back and check that out. We quite enjoyed ourselves talking about it.
It's a good thought process. What did I call it? Was it mozzarella or something like that?
Something like that with the name.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of use of I guess foods to make them sound like um, fantasy places or names. But I have another one to throw at Rob, and this is just maybe if you're listening or you're watching, play along, see what sort of characters that you would come up
Mm.
with. Maybe even write them in the comments. We'd love to see those because I'm sure most of the time they are funny or very impressive.
Yeah.
This one isn't built on humor like the first one was. This one is more serious, but I'd still
No
like to
pizza this time.
no pizza this time. So I'd like to see what Rob comes up with. And maybe you'll also learn something out about improv and just, spitting ideas out, because that is generally what improv is. Even if we're talking about improv from a role playing perspective, a lot of time it's just saying the thing that comes to your mind. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
what's the rule of improv? Or is the whole always say yes type thing?
Oh, yes, and
Yes, and that's it. Yeah, because generally it's just yes and go along with what's going on. You shouldn't be really putting obstacles in the way, especially not of other players' improv. But I will give you this idea. I will read it out, and we'll see what Rob can come up with this time. Let me read. Let me read. So, a holy army marches across the war-torn plains of Avernus, led by the paladin blessed by a paladin blessed by the gods. Said to be unstoppable and slaying devils and demons single-handedly by the thousands. Paladin cleanses the first layer of the hells. It is said even Zariel, the Archduchess of Avernus, has fled from his divine retribution. Elsewhere, on one of the other 8 layers of Bator, is you, a mortal trapped in the hells, unable to leave. A letter or a message of sorts has been delivered to you. It's from a fiend, a devil from your past, who asks you to attend a ball in Nessus, the 9th layer of hell, the hells. A ball in the fortress of Malshim, a ball hosted by none other than the Lord of the Ninth himself, Asmodeus, 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 the supreme master of the Nine Hells. He promises safe passage to and from the event. All he asks is that you come ready to hear his offer, his deal, his bargain. The message suggests urgency, and though it is an invite, refusal isn't an option. What character would you play?
Well,
And what led to you to be trapped in the Nine Hells?
well, that's kind of my first thought process is I really need to put a lot of emphasis on why am I trapped there? And there's
Yeah.
so many ideas that you can come up with. Obviously, quite popular is the recent Baldur's Gate, where you've got Karlach, who was sold into service with in Avernus in the Blood War. You've got Will, who kind of found himself there because he took a pact and was
Yeah.
the Blade of whatever the coast is called, the Blade of the Sword Coast.
Blade of the Frontiers is his name, isn't it?
But the Blade of the Frontiers, yeah.
Yeah. I did
Or
come
you
up with this idea before I knew about Karlach's whole deal, by the way. I would like to put that out.
Yes, I know you did, because you told me you had both ideas when you did the mozzarella pizza story. Although I have not heard this yet, so this is all genuinely me thinking on the spot.
Yeah.
Um, you've also got other things that are quite trapped in the hells sort of vibe. A very famous Grey Knight in the Warhammer 40k universe,
Yes.
Khaldor Drago. I used to play Grey Knights a long time ago. I'm a very big fan. Um, he was trapped in the warp, uh, and would basically, instead of doing things in the warp, he would come out to whenever demons invaded. He would find a way out of one of their portals and side with the goodies. Goodies. There's no goodies in 40k. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent there. I think I would really weigh that up. It's easy to say that I was a warlock, so I'm not going to go with that option.
Good.
I'm going to go with a traumatic event. Similar that could have led to a pact, could have led to being a warlock. However, that wasn't what was offered. It was a simple exchange. A loved one was rather abruptly taken from my character. We will say his wife. I've gendered him. He is a he. I will do that simply because I am also a he, so I want to stay in character. And he made a rather foolish ritual that he shouldn't have made. He gave himself up in exchange for his wife's soul, who was to be brought back to the material realm. Let's say she died of some sort of wasting sickness like tuberculosis or something kind of old-timey, Victorian
Yes.
vibey. I do like those vibes, especially since I'm stepping back into Barovia. So that was all done and dusted, and he was given 5 years with her. However, if he told her about the deal, that time would end instantly, and he would go to the hells there and then. So he had to keep it a secret for 5 years. That gives him motivation to try and get back out. So he's trapped in the hells. He got to live with his wife for 5 beautiful years, maybe even had a child. Maybe that's why he wants to get out, because the child is maybe only 1 or 2 years old and he wants to be the father that he can be. And that's his motivation. So we've got that nailed down. What does he do? Well, it's D&D, so we always like to think about combat
Yes.
as part of something that defines us. It's definitely the most rules-heavy pillar of the three pillars. I think he would maybe be a wizard, because I want him to have known about the ability to do that. And I think
Yes.
wizards are stereotypically the ones that are arrogant enough to do something like this, um, and foolish enough to do something like this. High intelligence, low wisdom. Wisdom would be his dump stat for sure. Uh, yeah, I've always wanted to play the scribe subclass for the wizard. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's the ones
Order of
that
scribes, order of the
order of
scribes,
scribes.
order
Yeah,
of scribes. Yeah.
they get a lot of buffs to how they interact with spell scrolls, which is something that wizards already do very well.
Yes.
It's a very kind of centric part of the class, and I've always liked that. So naturally, I like the scribes. So he's got a lot of different motivations to want to go to Asmodeus's. Um, what did you call it? The
Or
Mish
Malshim is fortress.
Malshim, his fortress. There could be opportunity to search for high level scrolls, perhaps to get himself out if the if the, whatever was discussed with Asmodeus was not to his liking, or was maybe a little bit too weighted in Asmodeus's favour, which is always going to be the case.
Uh-huh.
And he would use his magics to survive the hells, um, trying to maybe carve out a little bit more of an existence. He would be naturally a researcher, so he would make the most of his time there, experimenting on devils, using devil blood to kind of write scrolls himself, being a very potent. I think he would be writing them in infernal and abyssal. And so there's all these layers to this character. He would probably be quite. I don't want to say angry, but he would be an impatient man,
Yes.
because he's found himself in this situation. He
He's,
despises this situation,
he's short on time.
not for religious reasons or anything like that. He doesn't have anything against tieflings or devils or the hells. He knows that they're, because he would know a lot about not everything, but he would know enough about the working of the world and the various planes of existence to know that it just has its place.
Yeah.
Um, his his impatience would come from his guilt. Um,
Well, he wants to get
he
back, doesn't he?
Yeah, he has all these emotions where realistically he knows it's all his fault. The illness isn't. He knows he shouldn't have made that deal though. So yeah, he'd go to the ball. He would find out what there was to be offered. He would use that as an opportunity to try and find a way out.
Yeah. Cool. I definitely, I think, just thinking about it now, would probably go down the route of somebody who had already made a deal or a pact previously,
Mm,
like you did. Um, Something along the lines of, I would want to. I think I'd probably play into having been summoned to hell to assist with something in the past,
yeah,
some sort of other event in the past. Whether you go back to something like one of the big disagreement between Lovistus and Amadeus,
mm,
or something like that. And in that was tricked himself, was tricked. He was one of those where, come here, I will, in reward for helping me fight or do this, I will give you I'll give you power,
yeah.
um, or I'll give you immortality. Uh, only downside was, of course, that in order to have that, you're required to stay in the hells.
He was never offered a way out. He was just offered power.
Yeah.
So he was still even given power,
Yes.
just never the way out.
So I probably would go like either warlock because it fits really well for that sort of thing, or paladin and go as usual, if I go Paladin Vengeance, just seeking, just feel determined to get vengeance upon the devil that wronged.
Yeah,
I would look to try and give away that I could be. It sounds really weird. Give away for Asmodeus to be able to manipulate me, um,
yeah.
so that I could make it interesting.
You could
Um,
always be a multi-classed warlock paladin.
could
That's
also
certainly
that's
popular.
very popular. There's also you could also go just down the route of being a fighter. And to be
Yeah,
you were just you were brought because you were a talented fighter or assassin or I mean many of the classes kind of work for that idea. Um,
I always feel like a fighter or some other like basic martial class that doesn't really, probably only really rogue would really allow for it as well. I don't want to say monk because they get a lot of the key point shenanigans, but like I think those classes really do lean well on not necessarily multi-classing, but just a straight up respec into a paladin because they would
yes.
kind of just good at fighting in their own ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's wielding a massive axe or a sword, or barbarians could do it as well. I forgot barbarians. And the anger of the rage could have been channeled then into an oath of vengeance. You know,
Yes. That'd be
you
very interesting. Yeah, I like that.
yeah, it's
The
just
sort
straight.
of
Multi-class works cool, but also I think that's one of the instances where I would always, as a DM, say you can actually just completely switch class if you like, because the swearing
yeah,
of the oath is what allows that to kind of take place.
yeah. I think I'd like yeah. 'Cause there are obviously some issues with the barbarian and spellcasting, but again, like
They can still smite, I believe. They
it's a
just can't
smite, can't cast spells.
keep the spells.
I
But
would. Yeah, that is an interesting one. I think uh, race-wise, I wouldn't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I would go pick whatever felt right in the moment. I think if I was looking at backgrounds, there's a few different ones. Like you could go down the route of just being like a mercenary, so it makes sense that they
yeah,
hired you, because that's just what you are. Um,
I think for
or
my
or even
guy,
a
I would
criminal.
probably have him. Yeah, that definitely work. I think with my guy, I'd probably have him start off as maybe a human, if not a human, maybe one of the smaller races. Like could be anything from a dwarf, halfling. Not really too fussed. I just kind of I want him to be one of the more normal races, but not an elf.
Something from the PHB.
Yeah, just something. When I say that, I mean not like a tiefling or a dragonborn or anything like that, because what I would want is similar to Will,
Yes.
because I like how people turn into tieflings. I quite like that aspect of it. I'm not hugely bothered for playing tieflings, if I'm honest, but for this particular character, I think it would really fit that part of him being trapped in the hells and giving his soul for his wife's soul, like he
Yeah.
would then, if we're talking about just straight up rules,
Yeah.
I would have him use was a human, then change to a tiefling using Tasha's lineage,
Yeah.
or whatever it's called, the one that's in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Have the benefit of not necessarily needing to change your statistics, just go with what you already had, which will have been intelligence heavy. And I've already mentioned wisdom as a dumb stat, because we don't,
Yeah.
this guy is not very wise. Um, I think background, for the kind of guy that I've described, the scribe, quite studious, maybe I would even go with one of the Strixhaven ones,
Cool.
just to
Yeah.
be
Makes
quite a
sense.
learned,
Yeah.
somebody who finds his life kind of in and around education, um, almost like a bit less of a comedic version of a wizard from the Unseen University in Terra
Yeah.
Precious This World, something like that. But like I said, less comedic. So he
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily have been a student when it all happened, but he would have been at some point, would have graduated,
Yes.
and would have had that kind of background, and would have maybe even then gone back into teaching or something
Yeah.
like that. And
Still. Yeah.
um,
Still works. Still works. I was just thinking of how do you do it from because both of us were similar in the idea that we were not we don't originate there. And I was thinking, what's a really good
yeah,
way to originate there, but not be like a tiefling? I think. Well, guess who else is trapped in the hells in Avernus? Tiamat.
Tiamat. So Dragonborn would work
Dragonborn.
perfectly.
You're just a Dragonborn born there. So trapped is less trapped and more just you cannot leave because you don't have the power to leave, and then that opens you
You know,
up for
it's
a lot of other
it's
backgrounds and
interesting.
things.
I was thinking the other day, weirdly, that this is coincidence. How the kind of idea of half races in D&D. I know we don't always like to use those kinds of terminologies, but um, I like the ideas of tieflings and dragonborns sometimes. Dragonborns less so, but tieflings definitely to like really think about what was the origin, what they could descend from, what their parents were, because they don't always have to have had just two tieflings for parents. Like we know that they could have come from um, packs way in the past of their bloodlines. Grandfather, great grandfather was a warlock or
Yes.
did something similar, and that this is just the kind of reverberations of that. So I would be interested to see Dragonborn born in the Hells. Could they be Dragonborn mixed with Tiefling?
Well, that would be
A
interesting.
more of a devilish Dragonborn. That would be pretty cool. Like horns and a tail.
Yeah.
One of the Tiefling variants from Volos when that was a thing, and they could have the more draconic wings rather than Tiefling wings.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. That'd be cool. I would think I'd definitely go down like a sorcerer route.
That would
Uh,
work. That would definitely work.
but yeah, I was just thinking like, how can you do it without it having to be trapped and more just you cannot leave because it's where you're from or whatever. Less of a you were tricked or part of a pact. Something a little bit outside the very warlocky feel that
Mm.
we started with.
I think
And
Warlock is the almost not. I don't want to say the easy way, but it's one that is probably feels the most natural to do
there's
in those types of
like
situations.
yeah, because there's the fiend is the
Yeah,
go-to is the go-to one. It's a go-to subclass. I mean, there's plenty of things. You could even you could go down the Will from Baldur's Gate thing.
yeah,
Um, you could be you just pursued something that was in the material plane and it went through a portal and you followed it and now
yeah,
you're stuck.
yeah. Magic went wrong. You're a sorcerer. You channeled your sorcery is a bit too hard.
Yeah,
Opened up a portal that went the wrong way, or
yeah,
you were literally trying to create, like going back on my example, a wizard that was this could be any kind of wizard. It
yeah,
doesn't have to be a scribe because they're all spell scroll focused. The rules exist as well in, I believe, the player's handbook, or it might be the DM guide for
yeah,
making your own spell scrolls and also homebrewing your own spells. If anyone's going to do it, it'll be a wizard.
yeah.
Um, and those things can go wrong,
Yep.
especially portal magic.
It's the most fun thing to go wrong. Especially if it's just a simple like teleportation spell. I love the idea of it just glitching into walls. Um,
Yeah, and chaotic sorcerers always work beautifully for that sort of
so
thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like I'm just
anything like chaos.
so many ideas, there's just little ideas of popping up in my head, and I don't want to keep throwing them out because we're over time really at the podcast,
Oh,
so I don't want to keep throwing out these ideas. But I definitely
that's the problem when we get inspired, though.
yes, and I wish I could say it's just a really good idea. It's actually quite a generic idea, but it's an interesting one that I thought would create conversation. It proved right. So we will call it an end to this episode of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast here on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, wherever you are listening or watching it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a like, comment, subscribe, and follow. We are on formerly Twitter, now X, and Instagram. You can follow us on there. We put up shorts and reels, or just let you know what's been posted onto our YouTube channel if you're talking about Twitter. A new episode will be available next week, all going well. Should be another episode next week, unless we see any problems. I'm trying to figure out whether next week will be our Christmas episode or not. I need to work that out, depending when it's released. Because then we could maybe do some Christmas themed uh, sort of stuff, questions or discussion. But I'll work
Yeah.
it out.
Give me a heads up. I'll wear my Santa hat and Christmas jumper.
Sure. I just need to work it out. But either way, return next week. Check our YouTube channel. Usually I post the episode around 5 o'clock-ish on a Friday. That's in UK time. I thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, I hope all your dice roll 20s, including your 8s, your 6s, your 4s, and your 10s. The 12s too, I suppose. We don't roll those very often. But I hope they all roll 20s. See you next time.
Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed.